It all starts with the fact that this woman appears in Tong's shelter, completely soaked, with a small child next to her, and literally begs to give them a place to spend the night. The owner looks at them and says, "I'm sorry, we're all busy, but Helen has been in this world for too long not to understand what this greedy bastard really means." And then she takes out one silver coin and silently moves it to him. And I swear, the whole personality of this man turned 180 degrees in the same second. Suddenly it turns out that they have plenty of free space. He walks them to the room, says that tomorrow he will explain the rules and the fee, and leaves in the same second as soon as they are left alone. Helen turns to the boy, and with just one look at her, you can immediately see that this woman is carrying something really terrifying. The boy looks up at her with his big innocent eyes and asks, "Where is Mom and Dad?" And Helen knows. She knows perfectly well what happened to them, and everything is so bad that the words just get stuck in her throat. That's why she does what any exhausted and broken adult does. When a child asks a question that he is not ready to answer at all, she lies, says that he will see them soon, that everything is fine and he just needs to sleep. The boy believes every word she says, and after a few minutes he falls asleep. And then Helen starts coughing. Well, and just slightly purrs in her throat. It's already about blood. This woman was holding on to one honest word all the way, literally glued together with only one willpower. And now, when the child is safe and sleeping, her body finally lets go. She looks at him for the last time and whispers her farewell. And that's it. By morning, she was gone. She died in that room before dawn. Ram wakes up in the middle of the night and immediately realizes that something is wrong. The sheets are soaked with red, and Helen is just motionless. The owner of the shelter appears with his mistress, hearing the noise. And instead of at least some normal human reaction to a woman who died in their building, this couple is mostly irritated by how many inconveniences it has brought. But then the mistress's face changes. She looks closely at Rowan, especially at his light hair, and says, "Doesn't he look like Pauline?" And exactly at this moment Pauline enters. The same hair, the same features of the face. These two could really marry their son's mother, and no one would even doubt it for a second. And this cunning woman immediately comes up with plans and says, "Pauline, congratulations, now he is your responsibility. And guys, there's something you need to know about this shelter. On paper, it's a nice charity organization with warm beds for those who have nowhere to go. It is financed by donations and public money. Very noble, very touching. And in reality, it's a real money-grabbing machine that hunts desperate people, especially children, hiding behind the so-called fees for responsibility." So Pauline and Rowan, this new fake mother-son duo, every day send beggars to the streets, just so they could pay for the right to sleep there. He's still there, in that room, still sees the bloody sheets, and still trying to realize that another person in his life just disappeared. Pauline looks at his face once and understands everything right away. So she sits next to him and just starts talking. She says she doesn't know in turn what he had to go through, but the past is already behind. All that matters is what happens next. Stay on the bright side, keep going, and one day happiness will find its way to him. Then she reaches out to him. Rowan takes her without any hesitation. He plays the role of her son. They work together on the streets, and what started as a simple survival gradually became something completely real. Pauline drove away the hooligans from him, stood between him and any scum who could only be offered the streets, and did so that even on the worst days he never felt truly lonely. 5 years go by just like that. Rowan is now 8, and one evening they sit together and remember all this. Long days, endless struggle, and how far they actually managed to get. But that morning, one rumor reached Rowan, and all day this thought lay hard on his chest. He asks her about it, still smiling, trying to stay calm. She nods and says that one noble house offered her a real position of a maid, a real board, a real roof over her head, and a real future. Rowan says that he's happy for her, that she'll succeed, and he really says it from the bottom of his heart. But even while he's saying it, his eyes are already giving it away, and before he has time to do anything about it, tears are already rolling down, because first his parents left, then Helen, and now Pauline. Everyone he ever loved left, and although this time it's for something really good, the heart can't tell when you're abandoned and when you're just left. Pauline sees all this on his face, presses him to her and says what he will carry through his whole life. Being alone is not about the one who is physically standing next to you. You are truly lonely only when your heart is empty. But while you hold on to those you love, you keep their memory alive and feel how much they cared about you. They actually never leave. So when loneliness starts to creep up again, she says, just close your eyes, put your hand on your heart, and listen. She'll be right there. A sharp transition. 2 hours later, Pauline leaves, and now our boy stands alone deep in the forest at night, twisting her words in his head over and over again. And then he does exactly what she said. Eyes closed, hand on heart, and just listens. And then something crazy happens. Mana starts spinning around him literally out of nowhere. His eyes are still closed, but suddenly he can see not only trees in the dark, but everything in general, as if the whole world became transparent at once. And somewhere inside this vision, he feels them, his parents, Helen, Pauline, every person he ever loved. They burn bright and close, as if they lived inside him all this time. They were just waiting for him to finally look. So years pass after Pauline's departure, and Rowan has not heard a word from her. He tells himself that she is probably just too busy getting used to life in the House of Knowledge. New job, new rules, everything is new. He prays that everything will be fine with her, and that's where it ends. And what else does he have to do in the meantime? He returns to what he knows. Now he asks for mercy alone, like any other child from Tongue, but Rowan is good at this. Yes, he is good at awkwardness. The director noticed quite early that this boy brings more coins than literally anyone else in this whole system. Therefore, he is transferred to Zone 1, to the best place, the densest stream of people, to the local version of the corner office for this shelter. The place is better, the relationship is better. And it is there that he meets Blake. Blake is in charge of Zone 1, and as soon as he heard about Rowan's past, about the dead parents, Helen, about all this, he took the boy under his wing, was warm, always appeared at the right moment, and as far as Rowan can judge, without any hidden benefit. Blake is also the person who finally gave his name to the fact these twisted clumps of light were not a sign that he was going crazy. It was mana. Well, I'm sure you already know what mana is, so we'll skip the boring details. The scene changes, and our boy is sitting in his usual place, with a bucket in front of him and doing his job. Passers-by throw coins, and he thanks them with this sincere warmth, not with that fake show of gratitude to the beggar, but with the real one from which people really feel good. A group of women pass by and immediately cannot cope with how charming this child is. Coins literally pour into a bucket in the rain, but Rowan is only half here. The other half of his mind quietly conducts experiments at this time. He works on one thing, trying to see both the physical world and the mana flowing through it at the same time, as if he keeps two completely different lenses in focus at once. From just one thought about this, my head already starts to hurt. But today something clicks. He gets both layers immediately become crystal clear. He allows himself exactly one little smile about this, because it was really difficult, but the minus comes at once. It turns out that it is so hard to keep both eyes at the same time, that his head spins and his strength goes away. With small steps, Blake approaches, notices a bucket filled to the brim, and raises his eyebrows. Rowan leaves in the usual modest image of a beggar. It's all thanks to the generosity of others, not me. Blake doesn't fully believe it, but he appreciates the mood. Before leaving, he leaves a warning. Success breeds envy, so if something seems strange, anything at all, Rowan must immediately go to him. One more last wave of the hand, and he leaves. Only there is one problem. Something already seemed strange, and Rowan did not say a word about it. Yesterday he noticed two men in the crowd. There was nothing special about their appearance, but their mana was of impossible brightness and purity, compressed to the same extent as Blake's, only as if even stronger. And they watched him, and then just disappeared. They did not leave on foot, but one jump flew over the building and disappeared between one blink and the next. Rowan spins it again and again in his head. They did not seem directly dangerous, but they were definitely not random people. He decides to leave this meeting with him for now, and his ability to see mana. At the moment, information is literally the only lever that the homeless 8-year-old boy has, and he is not going to give it to anyone for free. His bucket is already full, so he gathers and goes back to the base for a replacement. The usual road, it would seem, is nothing special, but halfway down the street he sees them again, and this time not only two, there are already several of them. They are concentrated and standing in the shadows. And this time they do not stay aside, they move with him, reducing the distance, one behind the back, the other on the side, and acting so closely that it becomes extremely clear. This is not a coincidence. Rowan is 8 years old, he is completely alone, and several very strong mana users. His pulse rises to the limit, thoughts begin to crumble. All he needs is to get to the base, just get there. The entrance is already close. Just need. And then he hears a familiar voice. Blake flies straight into the scene. This man is moving at such a speed that should not be legal at all. Overcoming the distance as if physics for him, this is rather a polite recommendation. He picks up Rowan without even slowing down, pushes away from the ground, and suddenly they are already on the roof. Then to the next, then to the next. People below do not lag behind, because of course they do not lag behind. And then Blake turns on another transmission and shouts to Rowan through the wind to hold on tighter, and that it is especially important not to drop a single coin, because tonight they need to eat. Rowan does not answer anything. Blake looks down, waiting to see the death of a frightened child. But instead, Rowan has an absolutely empty look of a person who has gone somewhere very far. Blake decides that he just fainted from fear, returns them to the shelter, puts the boy on the ground, and tries to calm him down. You are safe, everything is fine. Go inside. Rowan goes inside. Blake looks at him in the eye, slightly puzzled, but Rowan did not freeze from fear at all. His mind just exploded from all this chase, from the fact that he was thrown in the air. Watching Blake move at full power, he received something truly priceless. For the first time in his life, he was able to see for sure how exactly mana flows through the human body while moving. Not in theory, but with his own eyes. He saw it in real time, how condensed mana rushes into the legs before jumping, how it floods the hands when you need strength, and how many precise splashes are required to fly over the distance between the roofs. He recalculated them, he remembered each one, and now, one and safe inside, he decides to check if he really understood what he saw. He takes a breath, pulls the mana out of the air, begins to drive it through the body, feeling where it flows naturally, and where it rests. Then he begins to seal it, tightens it tighter, and prepares. And guys, this little boy shouldn't have tried at all to do any of this so early. But that's how he understands that he is a real genius. And now that our boy has caught the basics, it's quite logical that he can't wait to try all this in action. But before he has time to do anything, all the other older guys who don't understand at all why they were suddenly called back. Then the older Rowan appears and in fact tells everyone to calm down. Nothing serious, just the leaders of the zone are checking. Go to your rooms and sit quietly. But for Rowan, they make one exception. He is told to pack his things because he is being transferred. So the quiet boy goes to the elders in the shelter as usual, holding back a few steps. And then his elders stop to talk about something alone with some big guy. Rowan stands too far and doesn't hear anything. But then an idea comes to his mind. What if we direct mana directly into the ears? He tries, and bang, it really works. The sound becomes crystal clear through the whole room, as if he had just put on wireless headphones. And it turns out they are talking about him. It looks like he is being transferred from the dormitory to the main building. Even his elders have no idea why this happened. But at best, the director just likes this boy. And to be honest, he can be blamed for this. They say for a boy from the shelter, this guy is generally good for a rarity. Plus, after everything that happened in the first zone with those shady guys who followed him, it is quite logical to keep him somewhere in a safer place. The elders think that those men could be from some organization called the Union. We don't know what it is yet, but because of how it is presented, it is immediately clear that the topic is serious. Rowan immediately puts everything in his head. These are the same guys who followed him earlier today. Then the elder waves to Rowan to make him come up, and they go deeper into the main building, until they reach a woman named Amy who stands at the stand. The elder literally says something like, "Here is your man, and now say hello," and immediately leaves. And then there is an awkward silence. Amy breaks her question how old he is. Rowan answers that he is 10, and then he calmly adds that he can neither read nor write, and he never had a chance to learn it. Amy is not even surprised. She just says, "Yeah, that's how I got it. You're from the dorm." She tells him that from tomorrow she will teach him everything, so he can call her a teacher or an elder sister if it's simple. Then she looks at him for the first time and says, "You are too handsome for a boy from the dorm. That's not fair." This little boy conquers beauties right and left. Rowan doesn't bother at all, just asks, why does he even learn to read? Amy is slightly irritated. He still doesn't understand why he was brought here, but she explains everything to him. Readings at events are such important meetings which are sometimes arranged by writers, and sometimes it is necessary to know where the child reads aloud in front of a crowd of influential people. In the circles of higher society, this is considered a big event, and this time Rowan will perform at one of the major events of the shelter's patrons. If he shows himself well, he can even be chosen for private reading. And private reading is, in fact, the fastest way to adoption. That's how sponsors choose their favorites. True for a child who doesn't know how to read at all right now. Yes, no pressure. After all this information, Rowan just stands still, and the guy has no reaction at all. Amy sincerely does not understand what to think about him, but still gently strokes him on the head and orders to follow her. She shows him a new room and introduces him to other children, and when they leave, Rowan begins to lay out things in his own personal closet which he has never had in his life. And one of the boys comes up to him, looking as if he had seen a unicorn. He is in complete shock that this guy came from the dormitory, but at the same time he is terribly interested. He presents himself as Theo and begins to introduce him to everyone in turn. The light-haired girl is called Noah, the boy in the middle is Hayden, and the quiet girl, who stands a little to the side, is called Lily. Theo gives him a greeting speech. No one is ruled here, and no longer have to beg on the streets. The children in this room are engaged in the library, arranging books, helping guests, and maintaining order there. And now, when Rowan has become part of their team, they are really glad that he is with them. Later that night, Rowan lies in bed, and his brain just refuses to turn off. He thinks about books all the time, about the fact that probably anything that anyone at any time wants to know is already written somewhere in the book. He thinks about Pauline, who always said that books are the best that can be given to a curious child. Only one thought about it fills him with a quiet, deep gratitude. We move to the library. The first zone. Rowan literally gnaws into reading, and Amy tells him to bring everything he read during the day. He drops a huge pile of books on the table, and she starts writing down all the names, and then stops and looks up. Every book on this list is a fairy tale. She orders him to move to the second zone, to the adult department, and still sincerely praises him for how quickly he grabs everything. Rowan is in full delight. The second zone. Books for adults. He's almost running there. The guy starts looking through the shelves, and, to be honest, he is interested in literally every book. He wants to read them all at once, but then one name catches his attention. The Birth of a Kingdom, an account in the Union. Union. He's heard this word before from the muffled conversations of adults. He opens the book, and the first thing he sees is a complete map of the continent. It turns out that the region is called Grafton. Once upon a time, a huge war took place a long time ago, and after that the whole world was completely rebuilt. One kingdom, 6 self-governing regions, and then so that no one else would ever start a war again, the king created an organization called the Union, which has existed for more than 200 years in the history of writing. Peacekeepers. Allegedly good guys, and now Rowan is in complete confusion. If the Union is good guys, why did Blake run away from them as if it depended on his life? His first theory. Maybe the Union is tough, abstains from begging, and Blake was afraid to get into trouble, but it doesn't add up, because Blake had completely normal relations with the locals. This theory is dead, and then a darker thought. What if the shelter and the Union are not in good terms, and he is also very interested in why the shelter hides the events of that day? A few days pass, and Rowan pretty smoothly gets into a new order. All his order now is to come to the library, do a light cleaning, and secretly use mana so that all the physical work was a little easier for him. And here's the thing. When he lived on the street to use mana, he had to sit completely still, as if he was meditating with all his might for the sake of life. And now this guy calmly chases mana through his body while walking and reading at the same time. It's just a colossal growth. The only problem is that his mana is always dissipating instead of gathering as it should, which is terribly annoying, but Rowan is not one of those who will lose sleep because of this. Everything is one step at a time, and one day all the children are gathered in the main corridor. The deputy director and Amy stand in front without any unnecessary conversations. The deputy director begins to read the names for the next reading. Theo, Lillian, and Noah are all on the list, cool. But when she gets to the name Rowan, she really takes a break. Because, to be honest, this boy just finished the fairy tale section, so releasing him in front of important guests seems like a dubious idea. But then she just looked at him and thought, okay, yes, this boy really can't be hidden somewhere in the back. He's too handsome. One of his faces will already make the event better. So instead of reading, she said that this time he would just watch, feel the atmosphere, understand the general mood. The children, who did not pass the selection at all, carefully looked at him and muttered that it was not fair. The new one, who barely finished reading the fairy tale, got a place only because of his appearance. When the day of the event came, Rowan appeared in beautiful clothes and the whole room just froze for a second. Theo immediately patted him with a compliment. Rowan replied with the same, and then Amy took him to a designated place. When everyone sat down, they knocked on the door and important guests began to enter, and then one of them suddenly froze in place. She recognized him. This woman had already seen Rowan before, when he was begging on the street in the cold. Even then she was completely amazed how bright he looked for a beggar boy. Rowan also recognized her and did not waste time, immediately thanking for the money that she then gave him. Her name was Caroline, and she became his #1 fan even before she managed to enter the door. She immediately began to enthusiastically talk to the deputy director, telling how last winter she noticed this beautiful boy at the intersection. And now he stands here and looks for some reason even better than before. And when the deputy director in the meantime mentioned that Rowan had just recently learned to read, Caroline just broke down. She demanded that he read something. Today. Right now the deputy director tried to explain that he was here only as an observer. Caroline was noticeably disappointed, but seeing how much the guests got excited, the deputy director gave up and ordered Rowan to read the last chapter. And what happened next? No one was ready for this for a second. Rowan opened his mouth and the whole room was silent. His voice had its own rhythm. Soft, warm, almost hypnotic. The women in the hall were simply doomed. The eyes were moistened, the lips were biting, the hearts beat a little faster than usual. By the time he finished the excerpt, the room literally exploded with compliments. All the sweet words that can be imagined. These women were adoring him, and Rowan remained modest, transferred all the credit to the deputy director, and said that without her none of this would be possible. Because of this, the women loved him even more. Caroline immediately said that she would come again tomorrow to listen to his readings again. The deputy director agreed without even blinking. Later that day, Rowan was back in the library and busy with his work. He was looking through the shelves, but now he was specifically looking for books on how to combine mana with physical movement. He is completely immersed in the search when Blake sneaks up to him from behind. Blake throws a glance at the book in Rowan's hands and raises his eyebrows, because the book that Rowan grabbed is actually about the joys of life. Rowan suddenly turns around and arranges a whole exaggerated scene of fright, as if Blake had scared him to death. Although no, Rowan felt his approach from afar. Blake looked to praise him for reading at the event. Rumors spread quickly, and Blake was really sorry that he missed everything. Rowan tells him not to worry. He knows that Blake is busy with real, serious duties. Then Rowan asks if there is any news on the situation with the union. Blake replies that yes, these guys are creating problems again, but he is going to deal with them together with the administrators. Rowan immediately says that they completely believe in him. These guys from the union will get exactly what they deserve. And to be honest, from Rowan's eyes, it sounded especially strong. This boy just had such an impact on people. Blake felt it. Blake mentions that most likely he will not get to tomorrow's reading, and this is annoying. Rowan tells him not to worry. They still have a lot of chances ahead. Then Rowan says something that knocks Blake out of the rut a little, that he is most worried about his safety, and asks him to be careful. And Blake, in response, wishes him good luck. And then leaving, he points to the book, which is still in Rowan's hands, and says that it is definitely worth reading to him. Well, after reading, of course. And after that he leaves. Rowan is left alone in a quiet library and just thinks. He is really interested. What would the fight look like between the two people who really mastered the control of mana? But even stronger, he wants to understand where he is right now. What is his real level? Can he even somehow compare to someone like Blake? He begins to drive matter through his body just to feel it, and then accidentally tears the book in half. The flow of mana rushed straight into his grip, and without any warning, sharply raised his strength. Rowan looks at two halves of the book in his hands and says, well, this answers the question. So, then Rowan is called to the deputy director's office, and the guy enters there without a clue. What will happen now? The deputy director sits there and is clearly suffering, trying to figure out where to start this conversation. And then everything falls out. It turns out that our guy just completely blacked out all the other readers to complete uselessness. Now every noble woman who has ever been to his reading refuses to listen to anyone else. These women are so obsessed with the deputy director that it seems to her that gray hairs are already growing from stress right in front of her eyes, and now she is in a monstrously awkward position. She has to sit in front of the child and almost beg him to carry all her business on her shoulders. Rowan doesn't even twitch, doesn't bargain, doesn't ask for anything, just looks at her and says, of course I will do it. But then the turn begins. The deputy director comes out and makes a big announcement about a new special reader, and everyone already thoughtfully substitutes Rowan's name, but she calls him Theo. The whole room seems to freeze sharply. Theo himself begins to freeze, because he really cannot realize that it was him who was chosen. The deputy director congratulates him and sends him to get ready, and even Theo, kind and modest Theo, before leaving, takes Rowan aside and says, brother, your reading is on a completely different level. Something incredible is waiting for you, and it's really very warm. But at the same time, it only confirms that everyone in the building understands perfectly well what is happening here. Rowan looks as he leaves and feels a light bruise in his chest. Not jealousy, rather, he will not have enough of this guy. But this feeling lasts only 30 seconds of screen time because Rowan is already back in the reading room and again literally demolishing the noble ladies with his voice. And since we're talking about shifts, the deputy director again calls him aside and says that now he works twice as much morning and day sessions. And she is clearly embarrassed. It can be seen on her face, but the demand has already completely come out of control. Instead of any other person, there would be sales or at least light complaints. And Rowan sees an opportunity in this. He is sincerely grateful that people want to listen to him so much. The only thing he asks for are short breaks between sessions because emotional feedback is exhausting. Every time, the deputy director, who physically cannot refuse this boy, immediately agrees and only asks him not to go further than the backyard. Rowan accepts this little victory and goes outside. As soon as it gets quiet and calm around, he immediately returns to the experiments with mana. He chases in his head everything he read in that book, starting with the concentration of mana in individual points, muscles, joints, and bones, and then slowly stretching it all over the body like a current. And that's the main thing he understood. Mana does not respond to passive thinking. She needs a direct order, the real power of will, not a polite request. When he does everything right, the whole body seems to be on fire. When this state decreases, he still rests against the wall of concentration and does not yet understand the problem in the technique or in something deeper related to the body. But he is not going to hurry. It is better for him to build a foundation than to burn himself as he has already seen others. This thought brings him back to the memory of how Blake literally had to drag him to the shelter because the boy's legs were completely refused. He decides that the people from the Union probably at some point are tired of chasing him, and this is already one problem less. But there is something else that quietly does not give him peace. He noticed that even people who really master mana well can completely exhaust themselves if they push too hard to the limit. This makes his brain work. And what if there is a way to use the stored mana? Or even better, to pull the mana directly from the environment, where it is already flying in the air, and use it as your own. And then it fades away. He already kind of did this when he directed the mana to the voice and released it out. In fact, this is the same mechanism. If you understand how to give the appearance of mana the shape as well as your own, then the limit of what he can do will practically disappear. He continues to poke in this theory in the garden, and suddenly a vision. One single leaf breaks off from the ground and just hangs in the air. He soars calmly, motionless, does nothing, and somehow it becomes the most incredible that Rowan has ever seen. Our guy just invented something. And now we move on to the next announcement about the person to be honored. This time it's Lily. Everyone applauds. The deputy director conducts his usual farewell announcement. She stands still, all confused, looks at Rowan and is clearly trying to gain courage to say at least something. The girl starts to kick in and very quickly it becomes clear. She is about to confess in her feelings, but before she has time to squeeze out at least one related word, the other children in the room begin to loudly interrupt everything around, discussing how they do not understand why Rowan was bypassed again. Because by this moment, everyone has already calculated everything. This guy is a real gold mine. The deputy director knows this and keeps him here on purpose. The whole room explodes with noise and all the determination of Lily just turns out to be crushed by this gamma. Rowan, noticing that she said something, turns to her and asks to repeat. Lily, having finally missed the moment, simply leaves in tears. And Rowan, meanwhile, has already thoughtfully gone further, because his brain does what it always does and rushes in the other direction. He thinks that each special reader is eventually taken by a good family, which means leaving the shelter, new places, new people, and new experience. And most importantly, more contact with the outside world, more chances to learn, more data to accumulate. Curiosity is now really eating him up. The next day, during a break, he goes back to the garden and trains leaf levitation again. And this time it turns out much easier. The practice works. And then out of nowhere, he catches a purple trail of mana nearby and notices a man who is trying to slip into the shelter's territory. Rowan recognizes him. This is the same big guy who once brought him to the main building for the first time. And then this big guy just extinguishes his mana like a flickering candle. Immediately another man runs up and they start talking about something, urgently and very quietly. Rowan has time to disassemble just enough to single out one word, union, before you even realize what you've just witnessed. Someone quietly tells him to go back inside, behave as usual and pretend like he didn't see anything. Rowan goes back, still as if half frozen, scrolling through what happened in his head and finding no answers at all. And then everything gets even stranger. The day-long reading session is cancelled, and all the children are told to immediately go to their rooms. Everyone is confused and does not understand what the hell is going on. Before anyone has time to understand anything, Amy comes to pick up our guy and tells him to pack his things because today he is a special reader. And so we return to Rowan again, who is getting ready, and already now something feels wrong. Amy's energy seems to have gone completely different. That warm, familiar feeling, which usually came from her next to him, just disappeared. She is cold, dry, and serious. This worries him so much that he does not let go. He is still spinning in the head of those two men, everything that was related to the mention of the union. And inside he literally screams to him that all this is due to the fact why the day-long reading session was cancelled without a single explanation. He comes out and sees that Amy is already waiting, dressed, ready to go, and generally without empty conversations. She looks at his clothes, and a barely noticeable shadow runs through her face, as if she almost said something, but then she just tells him to follow her and starts walking forward. Rowan asks if he is being led to Caroline, which, to be honest, would be the best option. Amy does not answer, she just goes on. And for some reason it's worse than just not. They don't go where he finds out. Instead, they go to a place called Annex, a completely separate shelter for help. And at that very moment, when Rowan sees him, his whole body turns to stone. This place is dark, oppressive, and literally emits a constant bad aura. And it's not even just a feeling, he really feels it. Something is wrong with the man inside this building. Everyone who is there is carrying something heavy, something suspicious. That big guy brings him inside as if he is squeezing time. And Rowan throws the last look at Amy's face before they step over the threshold, and immediately realizes that something is wrong here, and yes, this place looks suspicious to the point of horror. As if without windows it is darker than it should be. And Rowan, right at that moment, silently makes a decision. He is not going to lower his guard for a second, and immediately uses his feeling of madness. Then he hears the voice of the deputy director somewhere deeper in the building. He is led to a hall that looks more like a ritual altar. And before he even has time to understand the situation, he is told to sit down and read Rowan Clark, the very book they chose for him. And then his gaze goes to a huge pit in the center of the hall, to this deep, dark hole going down much further than it should. He looks at it and then reaches it. This is not just a pit. This thing is just overflowing with mana, stronger than everything he has ever felt in one place. Dark mana, but he still starts to read. Poetically, atmospherically. It is such a break that perfectly coincides with the suffocating energy of the room. And when the words come off his lips, he feels it. Dark mana in the pit responds, gathers and draws to it. Emotions fall on him like a wave, uncontrollably, and his entire reading style becomes darker. But then the second one comes to him, and this is already a problem. The pit does not feed him, it is he who feeds the pit. With every word, mana leaves him, and the body weakens with every new sentence. But he can't stop, and he knows it himself. If he stops now, the pit will open, and the union will break in. So he tolerates and immediately begins to build a plan. Absorb external mana around himself and redirect the flow so as to protect himself. And it really works. Now our guy is completely in control. He even feels a little relief. Now you can read further without getting bored and use your feelings of mana in the same second as the people of the Union appear. Therefore, he deliberately drags time, intentionally stretching the reading, but the people who arranged all this are starting to get nervous. The ritual was already supposed to end. They decide that someone needs to go and check why everything is so delayed. Rowan already knows that they are coming, but something completely unexpected happens here. Instead of going to him, people from the shelter burst into the hall and go down to the ground right into the pit. Rowan watches them disappear below and thinks, damn it, are they actually feeding down there? The scene suddenly switches to the main viewer being smacked in the face. The deputy director grabs him, a man who conducts a ritual in anger and is sure that they tried to escape from all this operation. Meanwhile, our guy goes down into the pit and his whole world cracks in half. Right there. For this ritual, real people were sacrificed. He is still trying to realize this horror when he notices a familiar face among them, Pauline. And at the same moment, that evil man notices Rowan standing there. At the same time, Blake breaks in and demands answers. Why are the director and deputy director dead? This bastard replies that he killed them because they tried to escape. It was then that they found a strange fruit on the tree. Rowan was brought here to create another fruit, but the process failed and no one understands why. Blake looks irritated. digests all this, and then pulls out his sword from Pauline's body. Meanwhile, our guy stood completely still, like a statue, because now he remembered. One day he asked Blake why he never carries a sword. Blake said that his weapon is used elsewhere. And now this bastard realized what happened and the guy just blew his cover. He literally entered a state of complete psychosis, 100% pure rage. And now when our guy has finally blown his cover, he makes the first truly correct decision during all this time and just kills the man standing next to him. And then he starts going to Blake, and this idiot finally realizes what he miscalculated. Because this 10-year-old boy is emitting a terrifying dark aura that a child of his age cannot have at all. Blake does not even have time to finish his villainous monologue as Rowan rushes at him with speed and force, which has no place in the child's body at all. But then the fight for a second just stops because Rowan's attention suddenly switches to the tree, to this dead, terrible, cursed tree, and he just starts crying, completely breaking down. Then he directs his own mana to the tree and dives into the memories locked inside him. And what he sees is cruelty, frightened children, helpless people. They all disappeared. And then among all this horror, he sees something unexpected, a more mature version of himself. As if a fully grown Rowan is looking straight at him. Before he has time to make any sense of this, the chain of memories breaks. Rowan is pulled back sharply. He has more questions than answers, but something inside has changed, as if he touched a woman again, whom he considered lost forever. And together with this feeling, the voice of Pauline sounds nearby. He remembered what she told him, a truly lonely person only when his heart is empty. And while he keeps those he loved, they never really leave. Love is not what you can see. This is what you can feel. And even if the memories themselves fade over time, love will remain. It has always remained in his heart. And then, just like that, he came back. Blake presses a sword to his throat. This self-contented bastard tells Rowan that he was so kind that he waited until the boy would go through his little emotional moment, and that he always knew how thoughtful Rowan was. His subordinates, of course, failed the original plan, but now he became curious, so he gives the boy a choice. Go with him or die quietly, right here and right now. Rowan, who has already decided in his head that this bastard will die today, asks where exactly they will go. Blake explains that there is another farm, another tree. Rowan will take care of it, and Blake will manage it, and already officially. Welcome to Lutial. And if you're wondering now what the hell is this, then in fact it's a cult that is run by some fanatic who is sure that dark magic is the key to changing the world, and Blake is just a boy on the run for this. A faithful little servant. And then Rowan asks the question in the coldest tone possible. There is nothing in his eyes at all. Didn't he build this tree? Blake replies that no, he has no such power. This is the work of the high priest, and he is just watching. In any case, Blake has already finished speaking. He needs an answer. And here I just want to ask. Bro, you really needed to clarify this. Did you kill the woman who was almost like a mother to him? So Rowan, of course, firmly refuses, and this bastard does not lose a second and immediately goes to kill. And here, however, it is worth thinking for a second. This is the same person who treated Rowan like a younger brother. I personally, at least for a moment, was waiting for hesitation. But no, he really tried to kill this child without even blinking. Only Rowan catches the blade with 2 fingers, using external control with such accuracy that Blake's brain almost closed. And then Rowan quietly asks, did he kill Polina? Blake, who somehow still behaves arrogantly, asks, does Rowan want revenge? Rowan breaks the sword in half and says that he will not live to see tomorrow. And this phrase itself is already icy. But it beats even harder if you remember. In front of us is a 10-year-old boy who has just lost the closest person that he could call a mother. And then our guy charges him with a magic blow from under the body. And now this bastard is already lying on the ground. And then, without saying a word, Rowan cuts him in half. And when he's finally done with him, the guy's feelings suddenly catch a whole group reinforcements. And indeed, soon a whole squad is ready to scratch the territory and apparently assess everything they find. The leader of the group is Oscar, deputy captain of the Union's faith department, and he immediately notices Rowan and goes straight to the point. Does this child use telekinesis? Rowan blinks as if he had just asked something too personal. Oscar asks if the baby was taught by someone. Well, this thing. This is magic. Rowan replies that no, he figured it out himself. Oscar almost chokes because this is no kidding the craziest thing he's ever heard from a child's ear, and he's heard everything. But the boy is not lying. Oscar feels it, and from this everything only gets worse. They continue to talk, and Rowan literally rolls Oscar by the facts. He determines his rank just by the badge. By the way, he throws out knowledge about the intelligence operations of the Faith Department, and then he shows his telekinetic abilities, and one of Oscar's subordinates takes himself in his arms. Because they were not ready, one of his people takes Oscar aside and whispers that the tree was grown less than 2 years ago, and the spell that connects it is already broken. Although Oscar notices that any high priest would leave traces after himself if it were not for Father Simon. Meanwhile, Rowan just looks at the tree, at the house, at Lily, and Mocha is boiling in guilt because he was not kinder to them so far. He asks Oscar how many such trees he has already met in his missions, in fact asking how deep it all goes, how huge this thing is. Oscar answers, but at the same time watches Rowan all the time because an ordinary child in such a situation would have broken down a long time ago. He would cry, tremble, completely fall apart. But this one is different. He is collected, restrained, and already knows what he wants to do next. Rowan asks to take him to Vera's department. Oscar decides that Mocha is just shocked and at the same time hides it incredibly well. To be honest, better than most adults. He says that first they will conduct a special investigation before they decide anything, and orders him to follow. When Rowan leaves all this, from the tree, from the body, from all this gloomy scene, Mocha's gaze clings to something on the body of the dead deputy director. A lonely coin, just lying there, not taken by anyone. He puts it in his pocket without even taking a step, and then we move outside, where one of Oscar's people reads the official report on the damage. And the point is this. Vera's department did not suffer any losses. As for the number of dead, 13 people are dead from the cult side, and from the shelter side, about. As for the suspects, the circle was narrowed to 2 people, and one of them looks like Amy. Oh, and the high priests. Big bumps of this little gang. It turned out that they only prepared the space for the ritual, but did not destroy it themselves. So the investigation is still going on, because no one can understand how it all collapsed from the very beginning. When the report is over, Oscar turns to Rowan and asks where the boy would be most comfortable now. Rowan replies that in the library, and since Oscar is actually a completely normal person, he is like, okay, so the library. Show the way. In the next scene, they are already both sitting in the library and talking normally. Oscar starts with what he notices. Even here among the books there is no development of mana. So he is interested to death how exactly this child learned magic himself. Rowan is like, I'm smart, I just understood everything myself. And seeing this confidence, even Oscar, an adult professional, was forced to admit, yes, this boy seems to be telling the truth. And yes, he seems to be really incredibly gifted. But still, he needed to hear the full version of Rowan about everything that happened. Therefore, Rowan leads him through the whole story, starting from the very first moment when he was in the shelter, and up to his conclusion that, most likely, it was Polina who gave him his abilities. After listening to the whole story, Oscar is still sitting with a bunch of questions, because nothing fits in this boy at all. After all, Rowan has no preparation for mana, 0. And yet he managed to kill 2 members of this small organization, one of which was Blake, a skilled swordsman. Moreover, he somehow destroyed the ritual of the high priest, and they do this just by accident. And in addition to everything, the boy uses telekinesis, not pronouncing a single magic word. And this, as it turned out, is not normal at all. And at the end of it all, he doesn't even look tired. This kid just rewrote the rules of magic and didn't even sweat. Meanwhile, Rowan is interested in a tree, and he wants to know what it really was. Oscar gives him a complete layout. To put it simply, this is a ritual device created by the Levs specifically for the collection of human life. The whole point is to produce a fruit of compressed life energy, in fact, solidified mana in physical form. And that is why it is insanely appreciated on the black market. This fruit is eaten, and the one who eats it receives a direct increase in the capacity of his mana. And as for why reading was important in the ritual, certain conditions must be met to stabilize the tree and improve the quality of the fruit. And reading by ear, as it turned out, does a great job of this. Rowan instantly connects all the dots. He recalls how the tree seemed to be fond of his story, as if it really listened. That's why it stabilized. Reading worked. And then he goes even further and realizes that before these things were not trees, but real people. Oscar is sincerely impressed. He came to exactly the same conclusion, and this 10-year-old boy came to this himself. Then Rowan asks what telekinesis means at all, because he hears this word all the time. Oscar explains, this is a kind of magic that allows you to move objects using mana. Rowan shows it right on the spot and finally gets to it. He has been using magic all this time, without even realizing it. The guy had no idea. Oscar notes that although this is still a beginner level, the very fact that a child his age is capable of such a thing is already amazing. And then Oscar recalls that Rowan talked about wanting to join the faith department. And after all that the boy went through, after betrayal by those who were supposed to protect him, Oscar sincerely wants to understand why the faith department and the union are the same organization, just under different names. So this is not a small decision at all. Rowan honestly says about it. He does not fully trust the faith department yet, but in the morning he hints to him that Oscar is a good person. He feels it in his manner. Oscar is slightly knocked out of the rut. To hear from a 10-year-old boy that he is pure of heart, and he tells the child that trust in people only by feeling can once be worth his life. Rowan objects by saying that he reads people well, but Oscar softly stops it. It's not that simple. To involve a child in their operation is not something he can just approve of. Rowan begins to think that he is too weak or too inexperienced, but Oscar stops him and asks to listen carefully. One natural talent is not enough. His tone became serious, and Rowan's mood immediately falls. The offense mode is activated. Oscar explains that Rowan himself is fine. The problem is that it is difficult to make an exception for outsiders, and the boy is still very young. Rowan, without missing a beat, asks an obvious question. Is his age really more important than his real abilities? Oscar takes a pause because the honest answer is that Rowan has just laid down 2 adult men. His talent is real, but the Alliance evaluates experience by age, not skill. Oscar admits it and asks if it means that he is too immature for them, and it is then that Oscar decides to give the boy a real chance. He translates the whole conversation into a trial interview format and begins to ask real questions. The first of them is why Rowan killed Edgar. Rowan answers without hesitation. Edgar has already killed the owner of the shelter and his wife. The scheme was obvious. Oscar admits this argument but presses on. But emotions could obscure his judgment. Rowan agrees that yes, emotions were part of it, and he is not ashamed of it. But he also claims that emotions do not always interfere with thinking. Sometimes, on the contrary, they make everything clearer. There was nothing to save, and there was no reason to spare them. And if at that moment he had the power to do justice, he did it. Oscar asks the main question. Did Rowan have the right to kill them? Rowan had the power and he used it. But he does not try to hide it. He knows he killed a man. He does not justify himself, he just accepts it. Is it true that it was necessary? And Rowan answers without hesitation. Yes, it was absolutely necessary. And then he looks Oscar straight in the eye and says that the Union is doing the same. And Oscar believes that with the help of Rowan they can really finish this case. Rowan does not understand what place he takes in all this, and Oscar explains everything directly. Rowan comes to the Union, proves himself, and earns his place. Everything is extremely simple. And until then, Oscar just wants the boy to reveal his own potential. The meeting is over and outside Oscar appeals to his team. He announces that the participation of the tungsten shelter with the help of the grave has been confirmed and this has already been sorted out. The Union has succeeded. Darkness in this area is eliminated. The shelter will return to normal work. He gives a signal and the division begins to leave. Before leaving, Oscar calls this stunning elf 10 out of 10 named Sienna. She comes up and our boy is immediately surprised because blue mana comes out of her waves. She literally shines. Oscar brings her to the case and says that we need to bring Rowan to the Union safe and sound. Someone is incredibly lucky that adult men want to sell their soul. Grandmother and neighbor's cat just to swap places with a 10-year-old boy. Sienna is a pillar of faith. The journey will take 2 weeks. Is there anything important that needs to be collected? The tone is purely business, sharp and precise. Rowan has nothing to collect. She raises her eyebrows, gives him one last chance, and then offers to ask questions, as if provoking him not to waste her time in vain. Rowan immediately asks about her race, a dark elf, and then, because he has no filter at all, he says that he expected a much darker aura from dark elves, and she has a bright and shining one. Even Sienna looks at him as if she is looking at something that cannot be immediately determined. She says that it is probably in his genealogy, which affects perception. And this is where the topic ends. Oscar says goodbye, and the boy turns to the rest of the team and sincerely wishes them to take care of themselves. The whole team is silent because these people are clearly not used to such words. The scene changes, and Rowan and Sienna set up a camp in the middle of nowhere. And then Sienna takes out small homemade scissors, which she has been working on secretly all this time, and gives them to our boy. Rowan is so upset that he immediately goes into extreme respect mode, addressing her as if she were a real queen or something like that. Sienna is like, no, stop it. but calling her an older sister also seemed strange. So after a little thinking, Rowan eventually stops at Sienna, since they still have to work together. This is such an awkward and at the same time cute decision that Sienna literally has to turn away to hide how much it hurts her. The dark elfess Sienna is embarrassed because of the child. Then Rowan, starting to pamper his telekinetic power, makes the broken blade rotate in the air, and Sienna just watches. Like, what kind of power is that? Rowan reminds that the vice captain called it telekinetic magic. And Sienna is like, well, yes, probably this is the closest definition of what we have. But to be honest, this word does not convey the essence at all. Rowan is confused, and then she explains, his magic is really unique in its kind. Most magicians need to read spells, draw magic circles, and arrange this whole ritual circus just to touch mana. And this boy, he just does it. Without instructions, without training, without anything at all. She says that such an innate control over mana was only in ancient elves. Those very primitive elves even before it was divided into dark elves, higher elves, and others. Then she looks him right in the eye and says that only one color of his eyes understands. His parents were definitely not ordinary people. This is already beating completely differently. Rowan is silent, thinking about them. The next day they arrive in the Union. And brother, this place is not at all what Rowan imagined it to be. It's literally a whole city. Sienna gives him a big tour and explains that there is a residential area and a shopping district here, but the real power is not in buildings but in people. All races of the continent flow here. The strongest warriors and magicians in the world literally settled here to protect ordinary people from psychos like Graves. Therefore, this place is called the Sword and Book of the Continent. There is both strength and knowledge here. Rowan absorbs all this like a sponge. His eyes are wide open and his mind silently lays out everything on the shelves. And then they are intercepted. A certain Laser appears, the director of the management department of the Union, and immediately focuses all his attention on Rowan, and immediately takes him aside for a personal conversation. As a result, they find themselves in a room that is dazzlingly bright, almost even suspicious. Rowan immediately notes this in his head because this boy notices everything. Rowan already knows that this is the place where all the main heavyweights gather. But what really gives out Laser is his aura. It is not shouting and not pressing. It is perfectly controllable, not a single drop in vain. And somehow it is much more impressive than any loud and demonstrative manifestation of strength. Rowan quietly begins to question how strong this person really is. And then Laser does something unexpected. He politely asks Rowan to give him a hand and takes it with both his hands. And in the same second, Rowan feels it. This person does exactly the same mana management as Rowan himself, only on a completely different level. As if Rowan had drawn stickmen. And this guy here is painting the damn Sistine Chapel. And instead of fear, Rowan comes to full delight. He did not know that others could do this. He did not know that this could be brought to such a level at all. The man literally vibrates with excitement, and Laser's gaze slides to the coin hanging from Rowan. The same one that he took from the deputy director. Even before the man has time to ask, Rowan immediately puts everything in its place. He did not steal it. It belonged to his grandmother. He just returned what was already his. Laser asks to show him the coat of arms on it. And here it gets interesting. He asks politely, but Rowan's body just does not move at all. He tries to pull his hand away, trying to shift the weight, but without result. Laser literally spat their mana, holding it in place, without making a single aggressive move. This is the most polite prison cell that Rowan has ever been in. And that's why Rowan immediately starts calculating everything. If he can simultaneously withstand the pressure of gravity and the pressure of mana, maybe then he will be able to slip out. He tries, and he really succeeds. Laser looks sincerely impressed, but Rowan himself is already irritated with himself, because, in fact, he just copied the technique of the director himself and returned it to him. Nothing of his own, only Laser also notices it and is even more impressed precisely because of this. Laser studies the coat of arms, and for the first time his perfect mana control fails for a split second. Rowan catches it instantly. The director sincerely thanks him not just for his politeness, but for the fact that he showed him what he had been thinking about for a long time. Rowan, still full of curiosity, directly asks, "Are you the strongest person in the Union?" Laser laughs and wavers, calling himself just an old raccoon who helps the next generation. Rowan takes it absolutely literally and completely makes a joke, which is very much in his style, but Laser answers honestly, "All 17 captains are real monsters." The commander above them is at a completely different level, and above them is the governor and the top of the leadership, and compared to such people, yes, the raccoon is quite suitable. Then Laser asks Rowan, can he come again with questions? Laser answers that yes, let him just sign up for the reception. When the conversation comes to an end, Rowan mentally brings Laser into two categories at once, good and strong, and from this boy this is already the highest praise. He leaves with a firm feeling that coming to the Union was the right decision. And then he sees his new home, the Union Academy. Sienna explains, it is here that members of the Union send their children when they leave for a long time. And this in fact means a school full of children who grew up in such a life. It is not narrowly specialized. Here they teach fencing, magic, martial arts, in general, everything, gradually building students from the very beginning. The idea is that 5 years here can turn Rowan into something really scary, and as soon as she says the word school, inside Rowan something just bursts. A sharp transition to the next day, and our boy already looks great in his new uniform. He is fully charged and ready to study. He asks a woman if she is a teacher, and she is like, oh damn, I forgot how to introduce myself. It turns out that this is Daphne, the head of the academic department and a language teacher. Simply put, she is a very important figure here. She gives him a schedule for the first year with a list of items of choice that he can take. And brother, the choice there is luxurious. Mana management, fencing, astronomy, and a bunch of other cool stuff. Our boy looks at this menu of knowledge and his eyes light up. And what does he do? Marks all the points in general. When Daphne gets this sheet back, her jaw literally falls to the floor. She is like, boy, are you in your mind at all? Such a load will break most of the students. If you pack at least one of these items, you're done. But our boy is sitting like this, what's the problem? Because he sincerely does not understand why studying may seem difficult to someone. Daphne looks at him as if he were an alien in front of her. Because what kind of child wants to learn everything at all? Most children would rather eat the ground than make a house. But this little psychopath is arranged differently. She is trying to warn him about the insane number of tasks that will fall on him, but he does not budge a step. In the end, she just gives up and accepts his list. Probably thinking, well, you know what, let him learn on his own mistakes. She tells him to follow her to the first lesson. In the next scene, our boy enters the class after Daphne. His eyes immediately rush to the sides, absorbing every detail. He immediately notices something important. Each child in this class has a lot more mana than he does. This confirms what he had already guessed. The problem is in his body, not in his abilities. Anyway, Daphne presents him as a new student, transferred late, and gives him a word. Rowan comes forward to introduce himself, and he has memories of those classes on reading in the shelter. So this feeling is familiar to him. He gives a polite and very nice idea of himself, says that he hopes to get along with everyone and their brother. His voice, the voice of this boy is so soft and sincere that it literally touches the heart of the teacher. Look at this little trickster. He is already building a reputation for himself at the teacher. As soon as our boy sits down, the lesson begins. Daphne tells everyone to open page 24 and ask Rowan to read, because he knows that he learned this while in the shelter. He opens the book and immediately recognizes it. This immediately pops up in his head in the shelter, where he read beautifully and with such a graceful tone that everyone listened, holding their breath. But now he has mixed feelings because Amy, the girl who taught him, eventually turned out to be part of the small group that betrayed him, and yet our boy is too mature for his age. He thinks that maybe it's worth giving her a chance to explain everything, because in fact he does not know her version of this story. The thought is spinning in his head that people are much more difficult than textbooks, and for a child this is already a very deep thought. By the time he finishes reading the excerpt, the whole class explodes with applause. Even the teacher is in full delight at how talented he is, and praises the school for being able to get such a gifted student. After the lesson, several guys come up to him and say, "You're just crazy, Daphne is never impressed by students at all, and you really shook her." Our boy gathers fans right and left, but then a short-haired girl with green eyes comes up to him. And the moment he sees her, something clicks in his head. He recognizes her from the same vision that he saw before. She is represented as Sophie Pebble, a senior in the class and a representative of the students. They shake hands and she asks what faculty he chose. He mentions fencing, and she notices that he only has a small dagger, and such. "Oh, do you want to join the union?" Rowan is confused because he actually just wanted to study everything in a row. He didn't think about the union at all, but now he became interested, and he asks if fencing is needed for admission. Sophie looks at him so strangely, as if saying, "Bro, are you serious right now?" And he starts to think if he just said something stupid. And in the next scene, all the students come to the training ground where the instructor is already waiting for them. And suddenly everyone just breaks away from the place towards the instructor. And our guy is like, "What the hell?" They shout to him in response, "We ran ahead." But the craziest thing is that they all use mana to speed up. Rowan's eyes light up right away because now he understood everything. Oh, here it is. So we have this kind of thing. But he activates his mana and runs past every student, although he started much later than them. Even Sophie looks at all this with such a face, as if this guy is definitely not normal. She sees that his speed is unnatural, because for him it looks too easy. And our guy doesn't care about the race and the victory at all. He has a lot of fun, laughs, and urges everyone to try to catch up with him. All this fuss attracts the instructor's attention. He turns around, sees how this little boy flies through the whole area and thinks, "We need to keep an eye on this." A few moments later, the race is over. Everyone is standing, grabbing the air with their mouths and cursing. The one who decided that this was a good idea, and our guy is just resting in the meantime. Everyone is going to the construction site, and Rowan is just happy. He found people who also know how to use mana like him, and Sophie is experiencing a real internal crisis at this time, thinking, yes, this child is a human at all. The way he accelerated, the way he overtook everyone in a circle, and the fact that he wasn't even tired. She is already sure that he is probably some kind of demon. Rowan notices that she is staring at him and happily asks, "Did you like the race?" Sophie mentally screams that this little demon has just humiliated us all and still has the audacity to ask if we had fun. When everyone finally takes a breath, the instructor is finally introduced as Diego Sanchez, a master of fencing and a teacher of this class. Our guy is delighted that he will learn from such a person. Diego orders everyone to take a wooden sword, and the faces of the children show all the pain, because after that deadly race they are still alive and well. But here's the thing, Rowan just stands still, as if frozen. Diego is like, "Boy, move already." But our hero slows down and looks at the wooden sword as if he were about to be bitten by it. He has a real memory attack. Blake flashes in his head and Diego immediately notices it. The instructor sees fear in his eyes, so he says important words to him. "Listen, the sword can be dangerous, but in the end it's just a tool. The sword has no intentions. It only shows what kind of person holds it. That's why you should look this fear in the face." And damn, for our guy, this really sounded very special. He has a moment of enlightenment as if, wait, if Blake had beaten me with a staff then, I would be afraid of staffs now. He understands that the problem is not in the swords, but in the person who wields them. Therefore, he approaches and takes a blade, thinking about himself that he does not necessarily become some kind of legendary sword master. But he should not run away from this either. Diego watches him take the sword and immediately notices two things. The boy has a natural talent for holding a weapon, but he lacks willpower. The instructor announces that now there will be sparring in pairs and any fighting style is suitable, just to defeat the opponent. And then Diego throws a real bomb. Sophie is put in a pair with Rowan. They are both like, "What?" And the other students are already starting to bet, saying that Sophie will crush him, because she is from a prestigious family of swordsmen and she has real preparation. The teacher gives a signal to get ready and the fight begins. Sophie takes a wide stance with a sword, looks very professional, and looks at our guy like a hawk. Rowan stands and thinks, so this is what real fencing looks like. He is really impressed by how she controls her weapon. It feels completely different than that creepy experience with Blake. He corrects his blade and thinks, what does it mean to have a good sword when he gets up in his own stand? And at the same second, Diego and Sophie get their eyes on their foreheads. This guy from the first attempt took the perfect neutral stance, as if it's a piece of cake for him. Although for a beginner this should be simply impossible. But here we are. Sophie is shocked, but she is not going to lose because her family's pride is at stake. She rushes into the first attack with all her might. Rowan dodges. Sophie hits again. He leaves again. She aims at his chest, and he is already shifted to the side. She tries to attack from another angle. No, he foresaw this too. She is getting more and more angry because this guy reads her like an open book, dodges and blocks every move, as if he, damn it, sees the future. In the end, Sophie starts to push back. She completely goes into defense and morally already breaks down because her careful opponent predicted every move she made. Finally, she admits defeat and asks for revenge. Our guy smiles and agrees. When it's all over, they talk for a long time, and Sophie is sincerely impressed by his natural talent. It turns out that they fought 4 times and went 2-on-2. Now Sophie is even happy because she finally found someone to spar with regularly. The other students are also inspired by him because the next lesson is magic, which means that finally it will be possible to sit down and rest. But Rowan is confused and asks, is this not one of the most important subjects for joining the union? Everyone just looks at him as if he has a second head. One of the students says, brother, our teacher is so above our level that it is impossible for him to learn something. And Rowan is like, it's hard to learn magic. But is the teacher really that bad? And then the other students understand that this guy doesn't know the most basic things. They explain that the person who teaches them basic magic is the former commander and dean of the magic faculty of the academy, the legendary Professor Arthur himself. And now, after a few moments, the magic lesson is already beginning. Professor Arthur enters the class, and Sophie begins to whisper to Rowan that this person was once a legendary commander. In short, a real Chuck Norris from magic. And our guy analyzes the professor's mana and realizes that it is even denser than the director's. At this moment, Rowan is already thinking who is the strongest person in the union then. And what's more important, can I call him to arm wrestling? Arthur notices a new student and presents himself as a teacher of basic magic, but immediately adds that most students consider his lessons terribly annoying. But Rowan is sitting with shining eyes because he really wants to become a magician and join the union. And this is literally what he does on the day of the old professor. He praises the mood of our guy, but also says to him, you understand that having chosen the path of magic, you are essentially giving up the path of a swordsman, right? And then it finally comes to Rowan. This is why the classmates looked at him so strangely before. Therefore, he asks why this is happening, and Arthur asks Sophie to explain. She spreads everything out on the shelves. To master magic at the level of a master, you need to master an insane amount of knowledge, and this imposes a huge load on the body and mind. Even if you have a talent, you are not recognized as a real magician without at least 10 years of training. Arthur confirms this and adds that even becoming a member of the union after the release is already incredibly difficult in itself. But here's the trick. Even a first-class magician is not enough to become an active member. You need to reach at least a second class. Hearing all this, our guy is a little disappointed and then gives up. Okay, let's bet I'll reach the 3rd class before the release. Everyone's jaws are dropping because this guy clearly doesn't understand what the hell the magic of the 3rd class means. Arthur barely holds back his laughter while writing on the board and explains that fencing is the main direction of the union and magic is needed for the pursuit of knowledge and wisdom. Then he brings out an incredibly complex formula for creating a basic fire arrow spell. But there's something wrong with it, and our guy notices it right away because he's already seen exactly the same formula before. Back then, at the ritual pit, Arthur is impressed and explains that most students would not notice the mistake because the formula looks too complicated. He reminds that although the fire arrow is considered a basic spell, more advanced spells become many times more difficult. Then he demonstrates the spell by creating a beautiful fire arrow, but Rowan notices something strange. The arrow looks unstable and seems to crumble at any second, just like my motivation on Sunday night. Arthur explains that magic formulas should be perfect. Even one tiny mistake after using all this mana can destroy the whole spell. Then he carefully adds the last component to the formula, and boom, the arrow suddenly becomes much larger and much more powerful. Everyone looks at this sight, probably thinking, damn, it's hot, because it's literally hotter, it's fire. Arthur continues to share his knowledge. Magicians have to memorize these formulas and make sure they are flawless every time. And changing a spell requires insane patience and skill. Because, for example, turning a fire arrow into a fireball requires more mana and creates an additional load on the mind and body. In addition, magicians have much more restrictions than fencing. Sophie intervenes and explains that it is usually easier and more effective than to use complex spells. The teacher adds that using mana is terribly exhausting, so the power of the magician completely depends on his personal mana reserve. Now Rowan begins to put everything together. He understands that the magician's abilities are limited by the size of his mana reserve, and if this is true, then his naturally low mana level will become a huge problem for him. And yet he thinks that, perhaps, if he studies the principles properly, he will be able to find some way around, although there are almost no chances of this. Professor Arthur checks his questions, asking what is needed for the spell to be created. Rowan correctly answers that a formula is needed, but then adds that it would be impossible for a magician to remember such formulas right in the middle of the fight. That is why they developed magic circles that express the principles of the formula. And then Rowan is stunned again. Those tattoos that he saw on the hand of the school principal were actually a magic circle, not a middle-aged crisis with a dubious choice of ink. Arthur confirms that some magicians cut out these circles on their own bodies to use the spell faster. A magic circle is in fact a symbol. If a formula is an equation, then a magic circle is its symbolic expression. And then Rowan asks them another question: is the spell of the voice just a verbal transformation of the formula? Arthur is alarmed because, damn it, this kid understood this on his first day, and some students have been sitting here for 3 years and still don't understand what the hell to do at all. Rowan explains his thought. The formula on the board is like a drawing for creating a fireball. If a magic circle is a symbol, then the spell must be a verbal transformation of the same spell. The professor smiles with pride, because this is just the concept that many magicians spend years on. Arthur confirms that the spell is built on the correct words and pouring mana into each of them to create a magical pronunciation. To show this, he creates a powerful fireball using only the voice. He also mentions that speed, tone, and emotional state affect the spell, making it look like a declamation. And our guy is just fascinated. Not a single declamation in his life has captured him as much as this. The professor begins to worry that he may have scared Rowan with all this difficulty, so he asks if he still wants to go to his ambitious goal. And what does our guy answer? I wish. Now it's even more interesting for me. Arthur is satisfied and decides to start teaching ancient languages. He gives out books for deciphering, and the faces of the students immediately show complete despair. By the end of the lesson, Sophie is completely exhausted by all this homework. She already regrets that she signed up for so many subjects this semester. And Rowan sits in perfect order and did not even tremble, because this absolute madman filled his entire schedule with classes without a single break. Nothing. His curiosity is so strong that it really pisses him off, especially Sophie at this moment. She mentions that his roommate will be a guy named Lucas, but Rowan doesn't care about this name. She says goodbye and leaves, and we return to his room in the dormitory, and our guy is already exhausted. He is trying to figure out the spell according to the formula and thinks that since he does not have enough mana to use powerful magic in ordinary ways, maybe he can create a new kind of magic that is better suited for his abilities. And to his complete shock, he really manages to create a working spell. This is just madness. This is an incredible achievement. But there is one problem. The physical load on his body turned out to be just monstrous. The spell worked, but immediately cut him out. When Lucas returns to the room, he finds Rowan unconscious on the floor, and he just stands like this. What happened here? The scene changes, and while our guy is lying unconscious, he begins to hear a familiar voice calling him. This is Sienna. She is feeling guilty here, because she blames herself and other teachers for putting too much pressure on him. Everyone thought he was some kind of genius wonder kid who would withstand everything that was thrown at him, but it looks like they really screwed up. Finally, our guy opens his eyes, and the first thing he sees is Lucas calling for him like a worried mommy. This guy really felt relieved. He is really glad that Rowan did not die or something like that. He normally presents himself as Lucas von Parcel and confirms that he is Rowan's new roommate in the room and just thanks fate for not going in and not seeing the body. Because finding your neighbor unconscious on the floor is not what you want to start the semester with. And Rowan is sitting and does not understand anything at all. Like, wait, it turns out I still cut out Sienna, yes, but there is nothing deadly about it. But he just can't understand why Lucas is now acting as if he is his hyper-caring mom. It turns out that Lucas, or rather his father, who by the way is Oscar himself, vice captain, personally ordered his son to watch Rowan's ass. And this guy really hopes that Rowan will say a word for him in front of his dear daddy. Judging by how calm Lucas seems, Rowan decides that he can be trusted. And in general, we can discuss how huge Lucas is. Seriously, you might think that this guy is a senior, but no, he studies with Rowan in the same year, although he himself is 2 years older. And before you decide that he is some kind of late beginner who just entered later, I will stop you right away. This handsome man has twice failed attendance requirements. This is an absolute legend, a real professional in terms of not showing up for classes. He also has a clear allergy to studying, but we'll get to that later. Lucas asks if Rowan cut himself while practicing magic, and this is a logical assumption. After all, their room looks as if something exploded there. Rowan confirms that he tried to use a fireball, but everything that happened after that was cut off by him. Lucas, who is more into swords, admits that he is a little disappointed that Rowan does not bet on his obvious swordsman talent, because he is already following in his father's footsteps. Rowan looks at Lucas and notices something interesting. Although this guy is 2 years older, His mana is much denser than other students and his physique is just pumped to the limit. I am sincerely impressed by how much effort Lucas has put into himself, and even feels a little insecure because he lags behind, although he just woke up after a nap. But he is still going to drag himself to classes like that stubborn idiot. But Lucas somehow persuades him to skip classes, breathe fresh air, and instead go eat. Rowan agrees but cannot resist and pokes him. That's why you failed everything twice. You are ready to skip classes for any reason. And now they find a place where they can have a snack, and Lucas insists that Rowan needs to fill his stomach to recover. But here Rowan feels a weak trace of mana nearby. He says, "We need to check it," and Lucas does not mind either, so they go to the magic shop. Inside, Rowan notices that almost all items are impregnated with mana, while Lucas stands in the corner and almost sneezes out his lungs because of all this dust, as if he has an allergy to the whole store. And then a terrible truth comes to Rowan. He is a beggar. Just absolutely, totally, and mercilessly a beggar. He already regrets that he did not take some money from the shelter. But Lucas, proving that he is a really reliable guy, offers to pay for him because this is technically also part of the task from his father. This person deserves the card of the best buddy. Our guy decides to check the ground and jokingly asks Lucas to buy everything in the store. Lucas pulls out this pitiful bunch of coins, for which you can't really buy anything but probably one item is enough. And Rowan begins to look for something that will fit into the peasant budget of his roommate. And then he sees an egg with some strange magic circle cut out on the surface. A sharp, muddy trail of mana comes out of it, and to be honest, it is insanely fascinating. And the most pleasant thing is that its price tag is just funny. The shopkeeper comes up and explains that this is the stone of Galatia, which most people just use as a beautiful decoration for the house. Everyone is sure that this egg will never hatch, so in fact this is a useless thing that just looks beautiful on the shelf. Rowan asks what's inside, but even the owner doesn't know. According to legend, this stone serves as a cage for some mysterious creature. The owner bought it, thinking it would be profitable to resell it later. But everyone didn't care, because it never hatched. Rowan is wondering if it will give something about the destruction of the seal, but the owner says he doesn't really hope so. To open it, you need some extremely unusual spell. But our guy has already sat down. He understands that this magic circle is the work of a real master, at least a dozen times more difficult than the usual fireball spell. He asks Lucas's opinion, and he just shrugs his shoulders, saying it's still cooler than some boring book. And you can hit the head with this thing if you need to. Iron logic. Rowan decides to buy this stone and goes out of there crazy happy with his mysterious magic egg. It's already evening on the street, but Lucas wants to end their walk day on a high note. He offers to go to the most impressive place in the whole Union, to the clock tower. And finally, there is also a governor, the highest power on the whole continent, with a rank equal to a king. Standing in the distance and looking at the clock tower, Rowan is thinking about the endless long way he still has to go to reach the level of these legendary figures. But one thing is visible in his eyes. He is damn determined to get up next to them one day. Rowan and Lucas stopped at perhaps the most impressive place in the whole Union until the sun set and night came. Our guys are just fascinated by this tower and its insane height. This thing is literally visible almost everywhere in the Union, even from the academy. Curiosity takes over him. Therefore, he asks Lucas what the red arrows on the clock mean and how to read them at all. Lucas scratches his back and stretches as if he is trying to remember. Having forced his two friends to work together, he finally remembers that the symbols on the external red ring show the current year. Rowan looks more closely and understands that the symbols are written in ancient languages. And then Lucas just gives up and admits that he never learned to read these clocks. This guy has lived here all his life and has never bothered to figure it out. Rowan turns on his huge brains and decodes everything himself. It says 262 and it fits because now is the year 262 of the kingdom. After that, he decodes the rest of the dials, month and day. Now it's 7 hours 20 minutes in the evening, June 14, 262. Our guy may have needed just a minute to figure it out, while Lucas, who literally grew up looking at this tower, did not bother to learn it. But here, everything becomes really hard. The reason why Rowan is so obsessed with this tower is that he has already seen it before in that gloomy vision of a tree. That illusion showed that the clock tower will be the starting point for a complete apocalyptic destruction. And if he remembered everything correctly, the clock in his vision indicated June 14, exactly 10 years from today. Having had a little more fun, the neighbors finally return to the dormitory. As soon as Lucas is convinced that Rowan will not break out again, he grabs his wooden sword and leaves. This guy can skip any classes that exist, but he never misses training. If he misses at least one day of physical activity, he immediately feels his body becoming sluggish. And that's it. Our guy again remains one-on-one with his twisted thoughts. The apocalyptic vision that the mysterious tree showed him is impossible to just take and throw out of your head. There is a serious probability that it was not just a random nightmare. It was quite possible that it was a real thing dream that showed him the real future. And if this is true, he must change it. Rowan closes his eyes and enters his palace of mind. The first step is to collect as much information as possible from the memories stored in his brain, using his ability to perfect memory. He looks through the images of the clock tower that he saw earlier, restoring every smallest detail with absolute accuracy, as if building a three-dimensional model. When he is satisfied with the result, he moves on to the next step, filling the gaps and blind spots in chronological order. Rowan determines specific things that appeared in the past and later became the cause of death in the possible future that he saw. The building, the roof, the structure, everything is taken into account. He remembers how he saw the body of a man who died from a collapsed roof, and our guy carefully puts what he knows about reality on his gloomy vision, carefully sewing together what is happening in each scene, as if some kind of detective from hell. Having filtered everything to the most important details, he pulls out memories of that truly terrible illusion. He recreates the scene in which a tree was shared with him and strengthens the areas where he can add more details. For a moment he hesitates. He does not want to experience that sad nightmare again, but then he remembers something else. Bodies on the ground. They look like his friends. Sophia, Lucas, and Sienna were lifeless and a little older. It is such a future that he categorically refuses to accept. This makes him especially clearly understand how weak and pitiful he is now, and what a complete loser he will become if nothing changes. He wants to understand what rank he managed to achieve in that vision. Therefore, he begins to dig into the huge mountains of data in his mind, and after a long search, he finds this. The only remaining scene where his future version is shown from the standard viewing angle, and the signs of the rank are not visible on it. But Rowan is not going to give up so easily. His analytical mind develops a way to literally change the viewing angle of this memory, and for this he has to dive much deeper into the general vision of the Flaming Union. Having made sure that all the details are securely recorded, he continues, fully concentrating all attention on the image of his supposed future self. He focuses on the chest of his future self to clearly see the sign of the rank, and then he sees something absolutely terrifying. Young Rowan feels like blood is cooling in his veins. At first it is difficult to disassemble something, but his future version looks bloody and beaten. And where there should be a sign of the rank, he has a huge shining wound on his chest, from which the insides are visible, as if this is some kind of scene from a bloody horror. It turns out that not only his friends are destined to experience a terrible fate, Rowan himself will also die a terrible and cruel death.